a lot of this stuff first came in as entertainment in the 70s, right? But where it starts to get really insidious from where I'm sitting is Amityville, because Amityville was always marketed as nonfiction.
So you have a Republican administration, and suddenly it's all back again. Obviously, Stranger Danger is back with the QAnon. It's so strange that it keeps coming back, but every time it comes back, we sit here and scratch our heads and say, how could this happen? And it happens. Hey, Grady, nice to meet you. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Always happy to talk a little demonology.
The crossover is so amazing, but just to first kind of go back, your obviously over your is so right on the money in terms of so many things, at least that I cover. So how did you get into all this?
You know, it was mostly accident. I was a journalist for about 10 years, and I was writing, and people seemed to like my stuff that was more horror. So that's what I seemed to be getting paid for. So that's just sort of where I steered. And then I figured if I was doing this, I just had these moments where I was able to sort of like dive in and learn stuff. Like I spent Gosh, I would say I answered a job, but way before I was writing books in the late 90s, early 2000s. I answered a Craigslist ad for like an office manager for a nonprofit. And the
Uh-huh.
nonprofit turned out to be the American Society for Psychical Research. So I worked there for like 5 years, and it was like they were doing a lot of internal stuff at that point. So I was mostly in the archives. So
Uh-huh.
I was
Oh,
able to
that's
just read
cool.
a lot. Yeah, learn a lot about sort of the spiritualism, the history of spiritualism, sort of keeping up with the 20th century version of that, because a lot of that went in the lab in the 20s with Rhine.
Yeah.
And then once The Exorcist came out in 73, or I guess the book in 71. But all that, so, everyone came crawling out of the woodwork. And so I was really able to sort of like it was part of my job to sort of know what was going on. And and then much later, I wrote a book called Paperbacks from Hell. Once I'd already had a few novels out, there was a history of the horror paperback boom of the 70s and 80s. It was mostly just spawned by the fact I was going into all these paperback stores, like used paperback stores, and just seeing row after row of horror. I was like, who are these people? Who's Barry Wood?
Ah,
Who?
that's so. I mean, look, we've got Satan's
Oh yeah,
Assassin, Satan's Seller.
yeah. Oh, Mike Warnicki. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? Mike Warnicki. What an interesting. Like, I try to do a little bit of a deep dive on Mike Warnicki. Like,
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Yeah, Mike's interesting. I mean, he makes so much stuff up. It's kind of
Yeah,
like it's hard to know what the real story is. But it's
totally.
also I grew up in a relatively religious household. So,
Oh,
yeah, and so this stuff all kind of not second nature. None of this was around when I was a kid, but I was growing up in the 80s and the Satanic Panic was in full effect. And I remember being really scared of it as a kid, and not
mhm.
scared of it like witches were gonna steal me, but the allegations were so patently false. I mean, even to me as like a 13-year-old kid, and yet people were believing them. Police
Right.
officers, judges, the press, people who were in positions of power and responsibility believed this garbage. And so, yeah, so it's just, I guess it's always been something I'm a little interested in, and it's always been around.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. You're from the South, right? You're from
South
Charleston,
Carolina, yeah.
South Carolina. I mean, come on. Also, I think you've got that going, right?
Yeah, well, what's also interesting about that, though, is Charleston in particular, and I think there's some New Orleans is another place, Charleston, I would say Savannah. There's parts of the South where really evangelical Christianity had a little bit of a difficult time getting a foothold because that kind of showiness was considered tacky. I
Hmm.
mean, like it was kind of like I mean, I knew people who went off and did charismatic and Pentecostal. So, they would go off and speak in tongues at a retreat or something. But the
Right.
kind of ostentatious display of it was really considered low class.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
I
That's
come from
what
a
hillbillies do, right?
yeah, yeah. Like my dad's a doctor. But my dad comes from a very country family. Like he went to a one-room schoolhouse growing up. And
Wow.
my mom's family was pretty working class, like really solidly middle class. And I remember, and my parents were very religious, but I remember my cousins for a while, some of them were answering the phone, praise the Lord. And we
Uh,
were appalled because not because of the Jesus, but because like that's so tacky.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, don't let it show, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I came into it from Staten Island, New York, which was
Ah,
very blue
yeah,
collar, but it was also this kind of blue collar, middle class, Italian and Irish believing in the whole satanic panic. I mean,
yeah,
you had Geraldo who had been at Willowbrook doing the
mhm,
Willowbrook thing, and then
yeah,
you had Geraldo with his special. So it always seemed like there was this interesting kind of history with Staten Island, and then there was just a lot of metalheads.
sure,
And so, growing up in Staten Island, we would go into Willowbrook and hang out, and everybody's like, "Yeah, devil worshippers, let's spray paint a pentagram in ode to the devil worshippers." But then the cops would come in and, of course, be like, "There's a pentagram, must be devil worshippers."
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kids. I mean, you look at, oh God, what was the Acid King murder? What was the kid's
Oh,
name who got
Ricky
killed?
Ricky Casso.
Ricky Casso. You wonder how much of that was kids just being kids. Yeah, like this is something that freaks people out, so we'll just lean hard on it, And I think, yeah,
That's the same. It's so interesting because the people who get so freak jumpity about it, they just don't realize that there's different subsets just love to freak them out,
right,
and they
right.
take bait.
Yeah. And I think there's also another thing where fans of anything, whether it's metal or Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or Orange County or whatever it is, Twilight fans, I think true fans of something, they're able to do something that I think they've always been able to do, but I think it's more apparent now, which is they enjoy something on two levels simultaneously.
Mm,
Metal fans really genuinely enjoy the bands they enjoy, but
sure.
they also have an ability to enjoy it ironically.
Yes.
And so they know that the devil worship stuff freaks people out, so they like to lean on that. I think
Yeah.
Twilight fans, and I think people who don't understand fan culture, they'll start clutching the pearls and getting the vapors. Oh my God, Twilight sending these girls messages about, coercive sex. These kids don't need your help with like messaging about sex. Their love of Twilight is about 50% ironic, 50% real, and they can do
Uh,
it both. It's Heidegger's Twilight. They can
y-
do it at both simultaneously.
exactly. And even whether they know it or not,
Yeah.
which is also interesting too. Of course, we have Michelle
Oh
Remembers,
yeah.
classic.
Unfortunately, a Canadian.
Uh, we also, for me, I was always trying to figure out. So I had the privilege, I'll say privilege, of doing a documentary about Maury Terry, who
Mm,
was a kind of, yes, satanic panic, but he actually also uncovered something real. And so it presented a real, conundrum for me
mhm.
because here's a guy who actually who finds something real that David Berkowitz didn't act alone, but then because no one will believe him in his true crime story, ends up throwing his lot in with the Satanic Panic, with Geraldo, and with
Right.
all because they would push his story and nobody else would believe him. So it just becomes this really interesting kind of conundrum of where I was sitting as a storyteller. Like he was right about some things, but he wasn't right about others. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, he threw his lot in with that group.
Yeah, well, and that becomes the issue, right? I mean, bedfellows are weird, and you're gonna go to where you get a receptive audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so you wind up with really unsavory types at times.
Well, yeah, it is. And so I was always like, where did they get their stuff? I love going through the evidence from a crime standpoint and parsing it out, like
Mhm.
what's real and what's not. And then there's like numerous levels of that. There were a couple books that came out more recently that said, sure, McMartin was total satanic panic, but there's always one nugget of truth in that. Like there
Mhm.
was one person who might have actually molested somebody, one
Right,
person, but then it's everybody.
right.
That's the other problem, right?
Yeah, well, and one of the things that's been very hard for me is I feel like there's a very much, believe victims, which, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
all for. 2 thumbs up. But
yeah,
I grew up in an age when also it was believe victims during the Satanic Panic, and
right.
a lot of people went to prison. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
and
it's a good point. It's
I'm
a really good point. Yeah.
and I'm not sure how many real crimes got stopped or solved. Uh, you know, um, and what's
Hmm.
always been interesting to me is um the Satanic Panic really fed into this idea of stranger danger that became very prevalent in the '80s and sort of led to the helicopter parenting of today.
Yeah.
You're far more likely to be murdered by a family member or sexually molested by a family friend or family member than anything. And the big sexual abuse scandals where I grew up were teachers and scoutmasters and like people who were trusted by parents and family. I mean, you know, and there was a huge pedophile scandal at the school I went to, and a lot of people, not a lot of people, the headmaster was in on it. The teacher was in on it. When too many parents complained, the teacher was sent to another school with a letter of recommendation. When too many parents complained again, letter of recommendation. This guy was a beloved parents, teachers, everyone trusted this guy. And when the case was finally brought, and I believe it was a civil case because the criminal statute of limitations had expired. I think there was something like 83 plaintiffs who were willing to testify, and that's
Hmm.
just the people willing to testify. I mean, there were a huge number of suicides in our
Oh,
school in 1 or 2 of the grades ahead of me, and people are always like, "Well, I wonder why there are all these suicides." Well, here you go.
yeah,
And this
yeah.
was not a stranger. This was someone who was vetted, who was support you know what I mean? And
That's
so and that's one reason things like Amityville always stick in my craw a little bit because everyone's over there falling all over themselves. Demons, demons, proof of, Satan is real. And in the meantime, you have what I consider child abuse going on. No one notices that because they're so excited to get a bump on their,
yeah,
EMF meter.
yeah. I mean, so interestingly enough, number one, I'm doing a doc about Eitan Pate. It's a false confession case
Mm,
that the guy who
yeah,
was jailed, I believe, it's complete
that
false.
takes is so
Oh,
complicated.
it's unbelievable. But the idea of, again, helicopter parenting, we really have no. You can't. It's really hard to track the effect that Eitan's disappearance had
Mm,
upon society. But the other thing I always like to say is that Satanic Panic, I think, uh, uh, it retarded the breaking open of the Catholic Church sex abuse scandal by like 10 years.
sure.
You know, there was
Mhm.
a instead of, and I always wonder, like, was there obviously some side support from the church saying, yes, it's the worshippers, yes, it's the devil worshippers, knowing that they were protecting a bunch of pedophile priests.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not sure how active was the Catholic Church with satanic panic stuff. I'm very aware of the Protestant involvement, but I'm not
Yeah.
so aware of Catholic. But that might just be because I grew up in a mostly Protestant part of the world.
I mean, look, at the time, we know that if we talk a little bit about Satanic Panic, and there's everybody who says, oh, there was also this underlying kind of note that went out in the moral majority that the nuclear family is under attack.
Right.
And right. And I don't think it was obvious. I don't know how they did this. They said, look at kindergartens.
Mhm.
And that's why kindergartens really became this focal point for some type of abuse. They're like, it's about the breakdown of the nuclear family. It's about the fact that women are stepping out into the workplace and they're leaving their children with childcare folks,
Right.
and
Right.
those childcare folks are suspect.
Right.
And so they all went after kindergartens, which just doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Yeah. And
but so
daycare centers. Yeah, those
yeah,
are. You're
daycare
right.
center.
Yeah.
And I know that this was like discussed in moral majority or in big heritage conservative circles, but I do wonder, like, what was the transition from bringing this up and then to the actual accusations?
Right, right. Well, I mean, the problem with the accusations is they're quite boring because they keep coming up. Like, you look at the sort of, at the end of the 19th century, there was this big thing where Catholic churches and especially nunneries were, being hotbeds of satanic activity. You had
Yeah.
people like the supposed escaped nun Diana Vaughn and Leo Taxel, I think was his name, sort of going on tour to talk about all, and it's word for word what you find in Michelle Remembers. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? The
Yeah.
underground labyrinths, the poop eating, the baby
Yeah.
eating. I
The
mean,
baby
it's
eating.
yeah, the having babies. I mean, it's all the same. I mean, the white slavery panic of the 1910s and 20s is
Yeah.
virtually identical with underground chambers and stealing babies and getting girls pregnant for heathen rituals. And you see it again in the Satanic Panic. You see it again in Pizzagate and,
Yep.
in some airs of QAnon. I mean, these accusations are they just get brought out and dusted off from
I
time to time.
It's just so funny that people continue to believe them. And of course, look at where the administration is. So you have a
Right.
Republican administration, and suddenly it's all back again.
Right.
Obviously, Stranger Danger is back with the QAnon
Yeah.
and with Save the Children's movement. It's just it's so strange that it keeps coming back, but every time it comes back, we sit here and scratch our heads and say, "How could this happen?" And it happens.
Yeah. No, exactly. And, when you're talking about where that how it got the accusations, I mean, as much as Michelle I mean, I don't like to talk ill of, like, Donahue and Oprah, because I do. I really think they did amazing stuff,
Yeah.
and were really groundbreaking, but they gave people like Michelle Smith a platform for
So,
those accusations, and then once you had McMartin, I mean, that was just copy paste from McMartin to
of course.
everywhere else in the country.
I mean, do you think that those? I always wonder whether Sally, Jesse, Raphael, Oprah, whether they knew or they didn't know, or were they caught up in it? It's just always so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, I know that I've met a producer for Sally Jesse, and I know that when they had that shooting, the person who killed
Yeah.
themselves, and this was in the 90s, I think. I mean, they took that very seriously and were very concerned. But the earlier stuff, I don't know. I don't know. And it's also a lot of this stuff first came in as entertainment in the 70s, right? The Exorcist,
Yeah.
Rosemary's Baby, the Amityville Horror. Like, it was entertainment. But where it starts to get really insidious from where I'm sitting is Amityville, because Amityville was always marketed as nonfiction. It always had nonfiction on the spine of those books. And you read Amityville 3, which I think is The Evil Escapes, and it's got like demon pigs surfing on the wings of a 747. George Lutz is fighting the demonic entity with martial arts. They're right on the spine, nonfiction. And I'm like, how?
It pisses me off too because, well, I guess you speak to James Wan and those guys, and it's like, well, I was pitching them, and I was like, let's do a documentary where we like kind of break open the Warrens and like really look at what's going on there, and they're like, no, you are
Oh,
not going to
really?
touch you are not going to touch our $1 billion franchise.
Yeah.
I was
Well,
like, okay, I get it.
yeah, I get it. But, I mean, you probably saw the deposition with the Warner Brothers suit. I mean, the whole stuff where Ed was, had his teenage lover and forced her
Oh
to have an
no, I don't know
abortion.
about this. Please.
Oh, yeah. So I think is it Warner's who does, I don't want to name, I think it's yes. So Warner Brothers was facing a massive lawsuit, and I can't remember which ghostwriter it was for the Warrens, because he was saying after the first Conjuring movie came out, and I think it was around the time the second Conjuring movie was coming out. Um, this writer was saying, "Look, dude, these are my books you're adapting. Like, I wrote these books with the Warrens. No one's given me a check." And Warner Brothers, of course, replied, "Well, we licensed the life rights from Ed and Lorraine." And this
Uh-huh.
guy's like, "This stuff didn't happen. It's fabricated. It is
Right,
fiction."
right.
So they got this, and the suit was, basically Warner's had to prove that this was nonfiction so that
Oh, because it's life,
Ed
right? Because it's life, right? So therefore, it should be real.
Exactly, and the suit broke down, and it settled out of court. It turned out the guy backing the one of the producers from the franchise was backing the writer because they felt like they were getting. I mean, it got really ugly and messy, but in this all, people started getting deposed, and one of the people, um sorry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who got deposed, um, and you can find this stuff, I mean, online. It's, oh god, I can't remember her name, and I wish I could. Oh, Judith Penny. Judith Penny got deposed. Well, Judith Penny was a teenager when she met Ed, who was a bus driver, and they began a sexual relationship. Later, Ed moved her into his house where
Oh,
she lived
right.
upstairs and Lorraine lived yeah, and they moved right over the garage. She got pregnant at one point, and they were like these devout Catholics were like, "You're having an abortion." Like, and she was with Ed for decades at the same time as Lorraine. And, and Judith's like, "Look, Ed was pretty tyrannical. I mean, I've seen him beat Lorraine. I've seen him, and a lot of people who worked with him say there were real anger management issues there. And among other things. And so, this is all public record and everything. And I thought for sure when this deposition came out, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga would be like, we're not playing these characters. Like, we're out. Money train kept on rolling.
No
It's
pressure coming in.
yeah. So it's but yeah, it's as long as there's money, there's everything's for sale.
So you bring up an interesting point that I always face as a creator because I'm like, let's do the real story of how Amityville is bullshit. Let's do the real story because there were so many. Jay Aston, right? Complete
Sure.
crap,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, The Exorcist was based on total bullshit, obviously. Um, and which is another thing that I'm doing with regards to Ronald Hunkler and his story
Oh,
behind this is the Exorcist kid who,
right, right.
that it was based upon, made it all up, made the whole
Yeah.
thing up, didn't want to go to
Yeah.
school. Um, how do you basically, because you want to tell people the truth and you want to, because you almost love it or you're in the world, you want to tell people the truth, but the people don't want to necessarily want to hear the truth.
Right.
They want to live in their kind of horror world bubble. So what do you
Yeah.
do? Do you decide not to tell those stories?
Well, I write fiction, so I got no problem.
I'm a
And
documentary filmmaker, so I have a
yeah,
different issue.
no, exactly. And horror is really weird because horror is the only genre of entertainment that says it happened, that says it's true. I mean, all the way
Right.
back to Castle of Otranto in the 18th century, these
Based
are
upon
some these are letters we found in an archive telling this
yeah,
ghost story. I
yeah,
mean, there's no such thing as a found footage rom-com. Like horror is the one that pretends it's true.
yeah,
So for me, when you talk about like one of my big areas I'm really fascinated by is the 19th century spiritualist movement running through
of
the
course.
30s and 40s. And one of the things that really split people, the American Society for Psychical Research and the British Society for Psychical Research, is the societies were run by researchers. And they
Hmm.
really wanted to find out, is this medium faking it or is there a phenomena here? And what happened was again and again and again, they were debunking mediums. And the membership was saying, we want to know if there's life after death. We want a really good ghost story, and you're pooping on our party.
Yeah,
And so they had big membership defections over the years. I mean, it was a real constant tension that is baked in.
yeah,
For me, when I was doing a project about the 19th century spiritualists, the tactic I took was let's put aside whether this is real or not. We're not going to relitigate things that happened in 1890. But
hmm,
take out real or not, these this is a fascinating phenomena. Like
yeah,
the fact that people looked at the medium Dee Dee Home, claimed that in full daylight they saw him levitate 6 feet in the air, fly out a window on a second story at one end of the room, and fly into another. Okay, real or not, this dude is one of the great working magicians of the
right,
19th century. And you
right,
had this huge unleashing of talent with especially women who were able to have a leadership role in spiritual. So for me, I really focus on this was this big, and then you have this issue of someone like Marjorie the medium, which was a huge scandalous case in the 20s and early 30s. Houdini was involved. It was Scientific American magazine was trying to be debunker, and Marjorie was smart. She just like she sort of, like, seduced everyone in the research team except Houdini, and, like, Houdini goes off, and they're, like, writing this report on her that's like, "She's real," and he's like, "Wait, what?" Um, she was, I mean, really smart, but you have Marjorie, who for 45 years spoke for this spirit, Walter, which was the name Walter was the name of her older brother who she idolized as a kid. And when she was a teenager, he was a drunk and a layabout. His parents had sent him out west to work on the railroads to toughen him up. And while drunk, he was between two train cars and they sliced him in half. So
Ugh.
here's a woman who pretends to be the spirit of her brother for
Mhm.
45 years. I just find that psychologically and emotionally fascinating. But then you
Right.
get into the Warrens, then you get into Jay Anson and all these guys with the Amityville, you get the Lutzes,
The Lutzes. Yep.
and I can't find much to admire there. It just seems to be people who are willing to do anything and trample anyone to make a dollar. I mean, you've probably seen my Amityville Horror where Daniel Lutz as an adult
Yeah.
is talking.
Wha
I mean, this kid is an abused kid. I
I
mean,
know, it's
it
so crazy, right?
yeah, I mean, you look at the Warrens inserting themselves in these cases where people are in deep distress, deep take out demons. We can argue
Yeah.
about demons later, but people are in deep emotional and distress. People have been murdered. People
Yeah.
are committing suicide. And
And
they're
they're
like,
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
just like, I cannot, to me, it's so bleak. Like, I don't get looking at everyone in the world like as a money making opportunity.
Yeah, like a mark. Yeah.
Yeah, like a
So,
mark, exactly.
yeah, so this is my issue because I wanna do, like where I come at, I'm like, "Look, that's fake." But it's act the truth behind the fake story is actually more terrifying
Yeah,
than what they propose. For example, like Hunkler, the kid who made up the Exorcist story, who then
mhm,
became the Linda Blair character, he makes this story up, but he is an engineer. That's why he was able to make this click. Like he was able to move stuff around the room, and
right,
he was
right.
able to because he's like a super brilliant kid engineer. Well, he goes to work for NASA,
Oh,
but
wow.
and he actually designs the ceramic tiles that are on the outside of the space shuttle.
Oh, wow.
But his whole life, he's terrified that his fellow scientists are going to find out that he was the kid that
Right.
inspired the Exorcist. So his whole life, he's like, he lives in worry and fear and terror that his secret is going to come out.
Mhm,
And so here's a guy who ends up dying like a broken man because he's haunted by the fake haunting that
mhm,
he perpetuated. And
right.
so that's like where I try and go. But it's always tough for me. I'm like, are people really, you know, you always want to say like, don't completely, unmask the monster, just shift the monster to somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? The other part of it's making people care.
Right.
Um, like I do a whole show about Maggie and Kate Fox, the Fox sisters who
Boxes.
started the spiritualist movement. And, the goal is to make people care about these
Hmm.
kids at the center of this media circus. I've always thought it'd be fascinating to see a version of the Amityville Horror where we acknowledge what we all know is real, which was it's fake. And the
Yeah.
parents were faking it and they were doing it for financial gain. And you put the kids at the heart of that. Like, what was that like?
And then you actually bring in DeFeo, the
Right.
dude, like there's a way in which you can
Yeah.
like he's like,
Well,
"What the hell
that's
are you people do?" Like, "What are you
yeah.
people doing?" Like, and it's like, so there's all this like back and forth, but then there's like terrifying things that going on. That would be really interesting. A kind of behind the scenes what's going on. Like The Master in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
respect, right?
No, exactly. And and that's another thing that I'm always like really I find gobsmacking about the Amityville Horror is the DeFeo murders. Like
Yeah,
they were real murders at the heart of this.
totally.
And George Lutz comes along and is like, ka-ching, ka-ching, I see money. Like, what the hell, man? Like, what are you made of to see that?
But the question is I'm trying to get to where he got the like so
Yeah.
where didn't Jay approach him? Jay
So
Anson?
I've heard all kinds of things. You know what I mean? At this point, everyone sued each other so
Yeah.
often. I mean, their lawyer was involved, like I
A
don't
priest
know.
was involved. The priest was involved.
Right. So at this point, it's such a naughty thing. KNOTTY, not NAUGHTY.
And not
Um,
NAUTHD.
yeah, like I don't
Naughty.
know how to unpick it. To me, it would require, and to me, the most important thing would be the timeline. Who
Yeah,
talked to who when? Who was
right.
there first? You would need to know
Which
who. Yeah,
Yeah, well, but and then it's like, well, where did they get the idea? Like,
yeah,
I thought the idea came from Rosemary's Baby. Like Baby did so well that they're like, let's
right.
tweak
Well,
this.
The Exorcist too. I mean, The
Right.
Exorcist is so
Exactly.
ground zero for this stuff. And in the
Right.
wake of The Exorcist, you had people like Malachi Martin, who was writing Hostage to the Devil, and all this sort of Catholic exploitation, exorcist adjacent nonfiction.
Yes. Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. And then Satan said, like, all this stuff is the same
Yeah,
stuff, right? It's all the same, like Catholic Church adjacent, right?
yeah. Well, and that's what's so weird too, because, you know, it's interesting. I'm doing a thing. I do this podcast about the history of horror, and I'm doing a haunted house season I'm working on. It's going to come up next.
Oh, cool.
And a
Is that like
lot
your
of
Katrina Longsworth, like you do a whole
Yeah,
thing?
exactly.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Um, and I just hope people don't make fun of the way my speech rhythms as much as people make fun of poor Katrina. Katrina. Anyways, but one of the huge things in ghost stories is um the Catholic Church
Of course.
and the deaccession of the monasteries and the church holdings in England when Henry VIII took over. And suddenly you had all these stories about ruined abbeys and ghost monks and ghost nuns. And there was a real fight, Catholic and Protestant, where Protestants believed that Martin Luther on down, ghosts were they were tricks, they were
Right.
delusions caused by demons. And Catholics, they were like, no, no, no. There's limbo, and when a soul escapes from limbo, that's a ghost. And you've had that tension on through the modern day, and Catholicism, especially in the States, it's trashy. I mean, it's the religion of Italian and Irish immigrants who weren't even considered white until
Yes. Yes.
well past the turn of
Half
this past
half
century.
black, half
Yeah,
blacks. Yeah,
exactly. They were scum of the earth, and
yeah,
here's their weird pagan religion with all its smells and bells and ghosts and
yep,
demons and exorcisms. And, you really have this thing where you get into the 70s where you're about to have a Catholic boom with the new pope, John Paul II, in the late 70s, and Catholicism becomes this source of endless fascination with The Exorcist. It really sparks a revival in the priesthood, and suddenly this low class, working class, mystical, ignorant religion is considered like it gets the spotlight shown on it. And so I feel like that's really where class plays in as well.
because it had a good story, because it had
Yeah,
monsters and
it had
demons and
monsters and
yeah,
ghosts.
yeah.
I mean, that was the
So
thing in the South. We hated Catholics. I mean, when Kennedy ran for president, there
well,
was
yeah,
widely in the South, he owes his allegiance to some pope in Rome. But
mhm,
we were like, "Oh, Catholics are ignorant, superstitious people who worship the Pope."
yeah. So, another book that I'm in the middle of looking at, The Entity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's,
Wow.
it's Frank DeFelitta who wrote it.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who and, his son, Raymond, is a filmmaker, like an indie filmmaker.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Oh,
that.
yeah, he did a movie called Two Family House, like, Sundance, back when I was producing movies, we had I
Mhm.
think we're same festival, he's from Staten Island. So I wanted to, like, go to him and have a conversation, like, The Entity is some crazy shit. Because then you bring
Yeah.
in sex. You bring in
Oh, yeah.
sex and
Well, and that's a Hans Holzer case, right? Is it, or am I confused?
is that the guy? Is that
Yeah, the
the
investigator. I think
Yeah,
it's
I think
Hans
so, I think so.
Holzer, yeah. Um, so, yeah, the entity's crazy because it kinda gets at the core of a lot of these
I
things.
know.
A woman
Sex
being
abuse,
I
right?
Yeah, I mean, a woman being isolated and
Yep.
being not just metaphorically preyed on, but literally sexually and physically abused and preyed on.
By an unseen enemy,
Yeah,
and, it's like, okay, how do we transpose that to what's really happening in the world, you
yeah.
know?
Well, when I worked for the American Society for Psychical Research, I answered the phones a lot. So I heard a lot of people would call in with their really worried about like an
No wonder
encounter.
you are like you are.
So, but people would be very worried about an encounter with the supernatural. My boss was really good about it. I mean, she was like, you can't validate what they're saying because then they'll think we're validating them as a society. And she's like, also, we don't know them. We don't know anything. But she's like,
Yeah.
you can't invalidate them either because maybe they did. I mean, you don't know if there's life after death. So I mostly listened, but the entity case is really a classic. Or not a classic. I learned that there was sort of a very classic type of person who was
Yes.
calling in with the thing. It's skewed female, but male, female. It didn't seem to be too gendered, but it was people who had just had an enormous upheaval in their life, whether it was moving across the country, a divorce. Children were almost always involved. They had always just had children. They had very young children. They were worried about what was going to happen to their children with this ghost in the house. And they'd often experienced a huge loss at the same time, which goes with upheaval, but a death in the family or something like that, and had lost their social circle. You know what I mean? The normal people they would go and talk to. And so the entity, I mean, she's a single mom, who's raising her kids and they're becoming teenagers and it's rough. And
It's
it
totally
really
rough.
fit the mold. Yeah.
Well, it's just like it's one thing to be like, there's a ghost in the house. It's another thing there's a ghost in the house and he is spiritually raping me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and it's also one of those things that there's always some explanation for these unexplained phenomena.
Sure.
And whatever it turns out to be, there's always an explanation, but that doesn't help the person because they are experiencing this as a
Right.
ghost.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is the metaphor. That is what's working for them. That is how they, and so to deny that experience, you're automatically forcing their square peg into your round hole.
Yeah,
Oh God, that
right.
sounds horrible, but we're talking about the entity. Um, but so it's a really tricky thing. I mean, she was I mean, how do you even help someone there with that?
I, I mean, you ask, I guess you ask like, well, it's obviously about sex. It's obviously about being raped. It's obviously about some type of abuse. I mean, I was looking at the Slender Man story
Right.
again. Slender Man story, right? I'm trying to be like, and I'm putting it out on social media, and people are like, "You don't, how can you have any sympathy for them? They did all these horrible things." I'm like, they're 12 years old.
Yeah.
They don't
Right.
understand, and they
Right.
believe what they see on the internet. By the way, there is a lot of people including the president of the United States, who believe what they read on the internet.
Right.
So, but the cops bring them in, and of course, it immediately. I couldn't believe it. One of the cops immediately goes to demonology, but what the cop doesn't say is, "What's going on at home? Is
Right.
everything okay at home?" Like, it could all go back to the not simplest, but a base idea of parenting and what's going on at home. But yet, so many people don't go there.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's one of those things where situations like this are so ridiculous to people and they have so many bells and whistles on them and they're so media friendly
Hmm.
and they attract so much attention that that they wind up in the opposite place of what they need because what they need
Yeah,
are people with a lot of training and a
yeah,
lot of patience and a lot of sort of quiet time to really what's going on here. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Because like even saying, I mean, some people who counsel victims, even saying what's going on at home, they feel is a leading question. You've got to take the time to really pull out of the victim where this is coming from, and it takes time. And when you've got a press conference in 2 hours because everyone wants to know about the Slender Man killing people, you don't have that time.
yeah, 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 yeah. Whew. Um,
It's one of those things where these things keep happening because they're that perfect formula to make them happen. Pressure, they're media savvy, there's a huge amount of attention on it, they're hot, and what they need to solve them is the opposite of all of that.
right. And somebody on the chat, it brings up this idea which I love, which is, eh, but then there's just the anomalies of what doesn't make sense. For example, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle a guy who basically his bread and butter is being
Mhm.
completely analytical, believes in fairies.
Right.
Makes no absolute sense. Houdini, who is completely loves debunking everything, is only trying to find the one medium who can help him speak to his mother.
Right.
It's you know,
Yeah.
there's always the flip side of it, which you just can't even get to. It's so
Yeah. Well, I
crazy.
mean, and the friendship between Arthur Conan Doyle and Houdini, I always think is really fascinating.
I want to do a book. I want to do like a show about it.
Yeah. I mean, because they really, by all accounts, had a ton of respect for each other.
I
But there
know.
was that time when Doyle faked a sitting for Houdini with his mother, and Houdini worshipped his mother. And here she is speaking English, a language she didn't speak, drawing a cross for a religion she didn't follow. And by all accounts, Houdini was heartbroken, just
Oh,
heartbroken that his friend, whether knowingly or unknowingly, had just betrayed him so much.
it, it is that idea definitely stems to what I deal with now, which is people are so invested. Like, why are people, or do you think people are now in this day and age far more invested in their belief systems and will do anything,
Right.
y- to hold on to their belief systems than before? Is that right, or is it wrong, or we're just
I think people always have. I mean, I think there was a brief time in the latter half of the 20th century, and I would say probably the
70s?
70s, yeah,
Yeah,
into the 80s,
where people,
where
yeah,
yeah, atheism and spirituality sort of was on a downswing or became more of a personal thing. But I think people always have. I mean, people have always killed over religion. People have always killed over challenge. I mean, I look at witch lynchings in this country, and
of course.
they're pretty constant. I mean, it's a pretty constant drumbeat of my neighbor is a witch. So Nelson Riemeyer in Pennsylvania Dutch country, he's
Yeah,
a witch. He gave us bad luck. And so we're going to go to his house and beat him to death and set his corpse on fire. And that was, I think, 28.
yeah.
Like it's sad.
But you would think, with all the technological advances, it's just only made us worse. This
Yeah.
digital campfire, the internet. It's like people are so willing to die on the hill of what they believe in rather than being open-minded.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, and you look at this branch of Christianity with spiritual warfare that really came out of the
ooh,
90s, which has sort of turned into the new apostolic reformation now, which believes that there is a spiritual war
yeah,
full of demons and all these things. And it really makes sense. On the other hand, I get the urge. I don't know if you know. So this may be a thing like a Presbyterian thing, which is how I grew up. But you heard of Corrie ten Boom?
no,
So she was famously a Dutch woman during World War II who just like a pretty average, housewife, all that. But she hid a lot of Jews in her house, like crammed her house, saved them from the Holocaust. And it
okay,
was sort of this very heroic thing. And she came to the US in the late 50s, I believe, and into the 60s doing speaking tours. And Corrie ten Boom on these speaking tours put forward the idea, which she sincerely believed, that Nazism was a result of demonic possession and that Germany had become a country of, everyone was possessed by a demon. And on the one hand, I'm like, this is risible. On the other hand, I get this idea of, between 32 and 38, everyone changes. Everyone becomes crazy. They become blood hungry. They yeah, I get. I mean, it's the same way Freud got so many women telling him about being sexually abused by a family
yeah,
member that he decided that was their fantasy. It's
yeah,
like I get saying, I can't believe that everyone I know and everyone they know has embraced this ideology. They must have turned into demons overnight. You know,
right.
I get it.
So, what are you into now? What's like not the haunted house? What's the next thing?
Oh, right now I'm very much, well, I don't even like to say this because it's so far down there. I'm already turned in a draft of my book after this one. I'm all of that, but right now I'm getting really into dowsing. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, it's a lot of the early oil in the US was
into
dowsing. And there
Dowsing.
used to be real battles, like physical fights over oil companies when this wildcatting boom was going on to be like, "We want the best dowser.
Yeah.
And if that means we have to break his leg so he doesn't work for you, we'll break his leg so he doesn't have to work for you." I mean, it got really but then you get into this whole idea of and you see people do it. I don't know if you've ever seen clips, but they really do get kind of possessed.
Yeah, of course.
And it's yeah. And I'm looking at this and I'm
That's
like,
incredible.
yeah.
That's
And I'm looking
absolutely
at it
that's incredible.
and you think about all the stuff buried underground in the States, black cemeteries, slave
Yeah.
cemeteries,
Yeah.
massacre sites,
Yeah.
minerals, oil. Like this country, a lot of it is about either digging things up from underground, like oil and gold in the gold rush and things,
Very.
yeah, coal, which, destroys communities,
Mhm.
or burying things underground to hide them. And then you've got dowsers, which are sort of the where those 2 things overlap. And I don't know what I'm doing with it. I don't know if I'm gonna do anything with it, but right now
I like the idea.
I'm reading a lot of biographies of which were mainly self-published of dowsers from, like, the '50s and the
Oh my
'60s.
god. You have a lot of patience. So, by the way, a quick side note of your other, uh uh, on my coffee table, actually, I pulled
Mm.
it over, but on my coffee table, one of my coffee table books is,
Oh,
these
shit. Yeah, yeah,
Rick
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
done by you. Did you know Rick Myers?
Oh, I know Rick really well. Yeah, I've known Rick for a long time.
Me too. He was friends with my dad at Mr. Writers of America.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting cat.
Yeah. Yeah,
Rick
yeah.
will always have a story. Something comes up, it's like, "Oh, that reminds me." And it's like, boom.
He's like, "Did I ever tell you?" You
Yeah,
know? Uh,
exactly.
so this one dude calls me one time for a documentary, Mike Stone.
Oh, yeah,
Does that
sure.
So I didn't know about this whole like LA. I'm really into like the LA Chuck Norris,
Mhm.
Mike Stone world
Yeah,
of what is it? Elvis wanted to learn karate
yeah.
and get private lessons, and then Mike Stone ends up having a relationship with
With Priscilla, I believe, wasn't it?
yeah. So Elvis is off practicing karate, and the karate teacher is having an affair with Priscilla Presley.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and,
Go. Write your next book, you know?
oh, yeah, and I mean, and there's you've got this whole guy I mean, Ed Parker, I mean, Mike Stone, all these guys, like, there was a whole scene, right? It was just wild,
It's
and they
this
were
1970s, like, LA, Orange County scene, is that what it is?
yeah, it's sort of like they all got their start in the late '50s because a lot of them were returning veterans, from World War II in Korea, and then, you get it becomes this real '60s scene, and then in the '70s with Bruce Lee, it suddenly breaks open like a piñata full of money, and everyone's just taking a money shower,
Yeah.
but it was a wild
I wanna
scene,
make
I
a
mean
documentary about that scene, like, if there's a scene enough to so basically for everybody who doesn't understand, basically back I don't know, Grady, you explain it, but yeah, go ahead, you explain it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone had there was a while when everyone had a karate instructor. Everyone, like, there were celebrity instructors. Like, it was this wild thing. And there are these moments that are so, I mean, not Joe Dante, Count Dante, who you always used to see as the deadliest man alive in comic books. I mean, he was a part of it. Robert Trius, Joe Lewis early on, Ed Parker, Mike Stone, Elvis was part of it. Bruce, I mean, it was
Sonny
Chuck
right, Sonny
Norris.
Chiba, Chuck Norris, Bruce
Yeah,
Lee, right,
it
this
was this
whole
really crazy scene, and they have these moments. I mean, there was the Long Beach, championships in '67. There were these sort of iconic moments and, the first Oriental World of Self-Defense in Madison Square Gardens in '74, like, everything it's an entire alternate universe, and to me, what ties a lot of it together is a lot of these dudes were veterans, and a
Oh,
lot of them had served in the Pacific, which is the theater that no one talks about really when they
right.
served. And someone was talking to me doing the book about going to the Oriental World of Self-Defense in Madison Square Gardens. He's like, "I was a kid. I had no business there." He's like, "These were damaged men." And
It's like
fighting was
Bloodsport, like real Jean-Claude Van Damme Bloodsport.
yeah, he's like, fighting was sort of how they kept themselves together. He's like, but these were messed up dudes who needed help. And he's like, a kid had no business being around them.
That's freaky. So
Yeah.
can I do a documentary? Like, do you think that there's enough? Because what I wanted to do was basically once upon a time in America, either the Hal Needham, I forget the other, there's like almost a bad guy stuntman who like killed
Oh,
some, what's
I
his
don't
name?
know. I don't
Uh,
know. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
so I wanted to either do the stuntman, the Hal Needham stuntman time, or the karate time. And
Uh-huh.
is there a documentary is there enough to do a documentary there?
Yeah, we actually, Chris and I, with the book, where we're going to do a documentary series with James Wan and his people. And
Did
then the
that not?
pandemic happened.
Because
And they just
I
dropped
saw
it
the
like a
doc. The doc was great.
yeah, that was a well, we were like, this needs there's so much stuff here because also a lot of it started at the turn of the century when these Japanese immigrants were coming over who had nothing. And
Hmm.
they were these little 5'3", 5'4" dudes. And they started realizing that at carnivals out in like the middle of nowhere, there'd be a thing called catch fighting where the strong man at the end of his act would be like, I'll wrestle anyone. I'll fight
Right.
anyone for like $100. And these little judo guys were like, oh, we got this. And they started winning. And so they were winning these like backwoods MMA matches. And I mean, we've got all these headlines from like the San Francisco Chronicle and newspapers. I'm like, who will defend the white race as these evil Japanese destroy all our men? I mean, these guys were kicking ass.
That's so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole soap opera that starts in the turn of the century and ends in the late 80s. But yeah,
I
I'll send you a copy of the we just put out a new edition of that book that we were able
okay.
to correct and add a lot of stuff to. I'll get your address and send you a copy.
Yeah, but I definitely think that there's a documentary because Mike Stone lives in the Philippines now, and
Oh,
he's like,
wow,
I'd
yeah.
like to do my story.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, and
the guy around him, and let me see if I remember his name correctly. I think it was God, I can't remember because there was a very famous teacher out of Hawaii back in the day who, oh, I think he was a Filipino guy, but he
mhm,
wound up going up for murder. And a lot of people and he has a lot of students that went out. I think Dan Inosanto is one of his students. But he had a lot of students, and a lot of people feel like he didn't speak English very well. And they think that when he pled guilty to murder, he didn't understand what was and they wouldn't provide him with a translator. So I mean, there's all these bits and pieces in this I mean, it's really great. Yeah, I think it's awesome. There's definitely enough for one, if not 500 documentaries.
and then I always like to ask people like, what story do you want to see on the horror side into a documentary, the behind the scenes and or something like that?
Oh, I think the one we were just talking about. I wanna know, like and I don't think anyone can do it now, but, like, I want someone to
Try
talk to
me.
Jude yeah, I want someone to talk to Judith Penny, about the Warrens. I think there's such a great documentary that would go from The Exorcist on through Amityville Horror and encompass all these people. They would be not the people that we've been focusing on, like George Lutz, Ed Lorraine Warren, Malachi Martin with The Exorcist. It's talking to the people who were the bystanders who actually
Sure.
saw what was going on behind the scenes,
But
because I think
it
that's
is
a
like the charlatans of horror.
yeah, sort of and sort of the and I don't wanna say this pejoratively, but the human damage that got left behind. I mean, Judith Penny gave I think in her deposition, she actually says, "I often wonder who I would have been if I'd never met Ed Warren, and I mourn that person."
Oh,
She was a teenager and she met a 30-year-old man, and basically he took over the rest of her life. And even after they went their separate ways 30 years later, she is living in the shadow because he's Ed Warren, of The Conjuring. And
yeah.
I want to know what those people think when they walk by a Conjuring billboard. I want to know what they think when they hear about the Amityville. I want to know what Daniel Lutz thinks when he hears about an Amityville reboot. Like, I want to know these people were sort of rolled over by the
It's the horror
steamroller.
story about the horror stories, the real
Yeah,
life horror about the horror stories.
yeah, exactly, like, the steamroller flattened them, like, give them a day in court.
Yeah, interesting. Grady, thank you so much. It's been awesome to talk to
No,
you.
thank you. This is one of the few times I've done an interview where I can just, throw out names and I don't have to explain who it is. You know what I'm talking about.
Great. I appreciate that. Well, and look forward to just do me a favor, tell everybody about what you got going on right now.
Yeah, right now I am just Witchcraft for Wayward Girls was my book that came out in January. This coming January is going to be out in paperback. So if you like books and witches and you're cheap, that's going to be the opportunity for you. And then my second series of my podcast, all about haunted houses, Super Scary Haunted Homeschool, that's starting, I believe, in January, and
Great.
it won't take 5 years this time. We will get it done in a year.
Yeah.
But that's the two big things.
Great, great. And well, I definitely look forward to reading it. I just read anybody who can actually talk about an exorcism, but then weave in Phil Collins and the
Mm.
Go-Go's in my book is really, you really know what you're doing.
To me, how do you talk about exorcisms without talking about Phil Collins and the Go-Go's?
Exactly. It's just brilliant. I was reading it. I was like,
Oh, thanks.
unbelievable. This is great. Well, Grady, thank you very much. Please stay to finish the download, but I always love talking to you. Thanks so much.
No, this is great chatting. Nice to meet you.